Welcome to the Glowland podcast, the podcast for remote work and freelancing in practice. Welcome to this new episode of the Glowland podcast. Today I have Ricardo here with me. Ricardo is a coworker of mine from TLR, the living room co-working in Malaga, and he's working remotely for some years now, as I understand, and he is an expert with a cold chain and is a consultant also now in Autonomo. Welcome, Ricardo, and thanks for joining the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. It's the first time I record a podcast, so it's exciting.
Yeah, it's going to be very relaxed, just a conversation about remote work. I think your work is very interesting because normally people are either programmers, graphic designers, and the cold chain is something very specific and very interesting because not many people do it, I think. Can you tell the audience a little bit more, maybe summarize what your job is and what you do basically?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, first of all, it's cold chain, and it used to be cold chain that the only thing I was doing, but the way industry sees cold chain is not anymore the parts where you transport things. This is basically the definition of cold chain: the parts of the supply chain where you transport stuff under refrigeration or any kind of refrigeration or freezing stuff, right? So, but nowadays is more than that. Is beyond that. Is about how you handle the product, how you treat the product. It's not only temperature, it's the entire supply chain that goes from the moment you harvest, let's say, a strawberry, to the pack house where you pack the strawberries, where you cool them down, where you pack them again in a pallet, where you ship them, and then all the way until it gets to the supermarket. And then I would even include the part where you buy the strawberry and you take it home and you keep it in your refrigerator at home. So I would call that the whole cold chain.
The whole cycle of cold chain, basically.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's interesting. And so you're a consultant in that area. So that means there are best practices, I assume, and there is many things people need to consider, and it's kind of complicated. Can you tell me a little bit about maybe statistics about how much food that is actually farmed is getting to the end consumer, for example, and what you try to improve in that cold chain, basically, to make sure to improve that rate?
Yeah. So what I'm specialized in this last let's say five years. I've been working for over 10 years in this cold chain thing, but in this last 5 years I've been working in reducing the food waste, because this is a major problem in the entire world at different levels, in the different parts of the cold chain or the supply chain. Let's call it supply chain. Yes, and what I do is I work improving the processes that every stage of this the chain have, right? So from the growers, distributors, retailers, and I study their cold chain and their processes. And I am specialized on translating the food freshness into data. So someone said once that you cannot manage what you cannot measure, right? So
yes, yeah.
If you can measure that freshness, then you can manage that, right? So you put face to what is happening to the fresh food, and I translate that freshness into data. And I analyze that data, and so we can improve together, the growers, the suppliers, the retailers. We can improve together their cycles,
Yeah.
and reduce food waste, save costs, and improving there are a whole lot of things that are happening because of food waste. And well,
Yeah. How much food is wasted? Maybe a number of, or maybe a percentage, to get like a rough idea. How much food is wasted currently, more or less?
In the whole world, around the 30 to 40% is being wasted. That's a huge amount. And I have here some numbers for you. So imagine that we humans produce 6 gigatons of, it means 6,000 millions of tons of food yearly, right? So we waste, that's food for consumption and not consumption, because other kind of food, I mean, is just for animal consumption, but we waste 1.6 gigatons of that food. So 1,600 millions of tons of food, which would be like you know how big is a 747 airplane, right?
Yeah.
So it would be like 183 millions. No, sorry, 9 millions of those planes. I say 183 because that's the tons that it weighs. So it is,
and that is per year, right?
That is yearly. Yes, you're right.
Okay. So most of this waste is industrial, let's say. Is it because it doesn't doesn't basically get to the consumer, or is it because of people throwing things away?
That's a great question, and this is something that is being debated, because there are two worlds. Sorry. One is the developed countries, or like what we call high income countries, and low income countries, and the waste happens differently, right? It depends. There are like, let's say there are like 3 phases under the consumer point of view. One is before you buy the food, right? And globally, we talk about losses there, because it's food that like when you cut a lettuce and some leaves, you have to leave them in the field because you're not going to use them. You just want the romaine heart, right? So that would be around like roughly 50% of the food that is wasted. So in the retailer, we waste around like 13% of that food. And at home, we waste food at home around 22% of that food.
Yeah.
And these percentages varies, So, for example, this is very shocking. In developed countries, we waste up to 40% at home. That's crazy.
Oh wow!
40% of
that is crazy.
And in the low income countries, they waste around 4 to 16% at home.
Okay,
that's because they don't have
more efficient, basically.
No, because the food doesn't get to them. So that's the thing. They don't have these advanced
luxury
supply chains, right? They cannot keep the refrigeration as good as we do.
So the biggest factor in this is actually every person at home wasting the food, but also I imagine a big factor is the whole supply chain, right? How much food goes bad during that process. And that's where you come in, basically, as I understand.
Yeah, I've been focusing on the things that happen before you buy the food. And lately, when you buy the food, let's say the retailer, the supermarket, and there is for us that is more than the half of, is like I say 78% of food waste happen during those two processes. Yeah.
And it is basically your task to make sure, for example, that during the cold chain, the food is kept at the right temperature at all times and at the right kind of humidity, temperature, and these kind of things? And how do you make sure, for example, give me an example in what one of the measures is you advise to take, for example?
For example, the implementation of technology is very low in growers because they usually are afraid of investing in technology because they have to see the return of investment is difficult to see, right? So for example, if you show them just the power of measuring what they are doing, that's a big powerful tool, right? Because just I go there and I show them, okay, let's put a temperature sensor in the field in your product, and let's track it to the supermarket, right? So with this sensor, we are tracking time and temperature, and they sometimes it will take them from the moment they harvest the strawberry, like 40 minutes to get to cool down that strawberry. But other times, we have seen like 9 hours, and they think they are doing everything right because they don't measure it, right? So just showing them that they are aware of what's happening, and those 9 hours literally kill the life of the strawberry. So first I show them what is the shelf life that they are achieving with their processes. I show them, I measure what they are doing, and then after that we can start working on the weaknesses that they have.
Okay. And then you will advise basically better insulation, better cooling in certain areas. Maybe don't store the strawberry too close in a truck with some other food that doesn't combine well. Okay.
Yeah, one common thing that they do is they cool down the strawberries too much, so they damage the skin.
Okay.
Right, so they don't measure that. So the moment they see it, the conclusion is obvious. Guys, take care of keep measuring what you're doing, and that will give you the view of that, and you can avoid that situation.
Okay, so to make a basically move to the remote subject, because this podcast is also about remote work. You're doing this consulting and basically your job remotely for a couple of years already, right? Mostly remotely.
Yeah, almost 3 years. I started in 2017. Yeah, and I think is the way it has to be, because I, as a consultant for an agronomist, as an agronomist consultant, there is no. I mean, I have field work and I have desk work, and I could be anywhere. There is no point for me to be in a single point, because one day I can be in Malaga, other day I can be in Texas, in California, Florida. You know.
So, do your colleagues, if you have colleagues, do your colleagues in that field mostly work remotely, or do they usually have offices?
Well, the people that do the same thing that I do, they usually have offices, but it's just conveniently, positioned near their house. So they basically, it's like going into a co-working space. So basically, no, they work remotely because like I said, this is a very dynamic job where you have to travel a lot. It's impossible to be in one place and don't move from the office. So yeah, it's pretty normal to have this.
Yeah. Okay. And what's the biggest challenge you have working remotely with your team? Because you're in different time zones, you're basically distributed everywhere. So
yeah, I've been collaborating with a US company placed in California. The supervisor I have is in Maryland, so it's in the East Coast. So sometimes I don't mind staying late for any meeting. But the thing is, when you work remotely and you are not in an office, you have to have more meetings than what you usually have when you are in an office.
Yeah.
So that's a challenge, because if every single hour you have a meeting, that sometimes I didn't understand that at the beginning. I was like,
Yeah.
what's this all the time we have a meeting? I mean, I cannot do my job here. But I understood that the workflow, I turned that into something that is very useful, actually, because when you
Yeah.
are isolated, sometimes you feel like you're at home alone. You're
Yeah.
isolated. You need some feedback, and that facilitates the workflow.
Yeah. Okay. There's different experience of people regarding meetings. Some people advocate no meetings at all, actually, or as little as possible, because uh, often they're very disruptive, and they actually cost a lot of money because so many people attend that could work otherwise. But sometimes it's important to align. So yeah, it's an interesting take.
But
And
I meant meetings through the computer. I mean, like virtual meetings.
yeah, I know it's the
Okay.
same though. The thing is, in my experience working remotely, having meetings, having a little stand up,
Yeah.
it's also important to ask yourself always, like, who needs to be in this meeting? Do we really need like big stand ups every day, or is it enough to have them every week? And the best thing is, can we also do it via email? Can we do it asynchronously? Can we do it to basically replace the meeting with something else, maybe a project management software? So in my opinion, meetings, I'm quite critical regarding meetings because they disturb the workflow usually of many people. But yeah, it depends, of course. In your case, it's a very different industry than what I know, the digital industry, basically. So yeah, so it's interesting to hear that take also. And do you see a trend in basically in cross-country remote work? How did you or cross-continent remote work? Because that's also something that is, I think, still limited. People prefer to be in the same time zone, more or less, or have overlap. So is that in your industry, since you're working with many different clients from everywhere, is it different? Does it matter less to be in a different time zone?
I think it matters less because there are no many professionals doing what I do. So basically, you have to go and get the best person you can, right?
Okay.
So I'm not saying I am the best. I think I do my job and I'm a hard worker. But there are not many other options there, right?
Yeah. So you're a very basically very high skilled, rare person that people need to adjust. That is also a good niche actually to be in. I realized in tech, in IT, some people like who are experts with machine learning and data science and so on, they have a bigger option to work remotely because the options to get something excellent for that job is lower, basically.
But that's the way it has to be nowadays, right? I mean, the world is all communicated, so it's so easy to call somebody in Philippines. It's so easy to call somebody in California, and they tell me
absolutely.
They tell me on Monday, can you be here on Thursday? So I go, I buy the tickets, and I am there Thursday. There is like 2 days of jet lag, but it's actually the good one when I'm going there, and I am there a week, and I come back, and I mean, you can even do some work in the plane.
On the plane, yeah.
So
that sounds reasonable. Like totally. I'm not doing that much traveling, but I think that's also something. If you're willing to travel, also nowadays it gets even easier to connect. And I think most barriers are, first of all, legal barriers. How to hire someone? You need to have an entity in that country, and so on. If you're freelancing, I think things are easier almost. Then there's like some psychological barriers where you basically think you need someone close by. And,
Yeah, exactly.
But that is changing rapidly. And like I said, we are also focused on remote work, and we want to advocate remote work. And as I understand, you still have some capacities for new clients at the moment. Is that correct?
I do. Yeah, actually, I am planning, and I am actually executing a plan for getting customers here in Europe, which would require less time, less traveling time. Like even going, round trip in a single day or so, because literally going to the Netherlands is like going to in a plane. Is like going to Madrid from Malaga in the train, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm exploring and I'm talking to
very
people.
Close.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very interesting because the law here in Europe is much more flexible and is pushing the companies to invest in this kind of technology.
I can understand. Yes, a sustainability topic. I think that is very popular in Europe, basically, also in politics.
Yeah, exactly. And we have companies here that have money and are willing to invest in this kind of things.
Definitely. So where can people find you best? On LinkedIn? Do you have a website for your services, basically?
LinkedIn would be the best. It's pretty much my website right now, where I publish all things I do, and I keep updated of my achievements. But I'm building a website that will be soon released, and it's called it's going to be called the Fresh Impact, and it's because I want the things to be fresh, and I want to create an impact in the society. It's something that has to go beyond just making a profit. It has to be something deeper,
Yeah. Great. So we will link this in our podcast description as well, so people can find you. And is there anything else you want the listeners to know? Is there anything you want to share?
No, I think that's it. I think you made a wonderful interview. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for attending. It was really a pleasure to hear about the details of what you're doing, and maybe the rough draft of what you're doing, actually, because we can't go into details in this short period of time. But it was a pleasure to talk to you, and see you around in the TLR.
Yeah, tomorrow, the presentation.
Exactly, tomorrow night.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a presentation in TLR.
Food waste.
I will attend. Perfect. Thanks, Ricardo, for joining this episode. And for all the listeners, thanks for tuning in, and see you again next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Glowland podcast, the podcast for freelancing and remote work in practice.